Might have it. We might be going live now. It's kind of interesting how this happens, right? Yep,
Yeah,
looks like we're live. Hey, good morning,
right.
everybody. It is Mike with Multifamily Unplugged this morning. It is Saturday morning, your live, unscripted, raw radio. And boy, are we going to be raw this morning, right, Moose?
Yeah, you got it.
Hey, I'm joined today by my co-host and friend, Carl Moose. Moose, why don't you say hi this morning?
Hello, everybody. How you doing? Today's a wonderful day. Mike and we decided to take a break from having a guest, and we're going to talk about that later today, but we're just going to have our conversation about what's happening in multifamily space and see what comes up and topics and have a chat. Are you trying to get on with all the other things, Mike?
I am. I am on. And so we're live on Facebook. We are live on Clubhouse. So let me just reset this room really quick. Good morning, everybody. This is Multifamily Unplugged, Saturday morning. If you are joining my co-host Moose and myself, we are live on Facebook, live on Clubhouse, and on Zoom. Remember, if you guys have any questions, need anything, drop them in the chat. We will get to them for you. And we are here to bring you some raw, unscripted multifamily. Well, maybe we'll talk about multifamily. We might talk about what Carl did last night, but I had no part in any of that, but that's okay.
Yeah. Why do you always bring that up, Mike? See, you guys have to understand, Mike does this on purpose.
Yeah.
We do Saturday morning because so he can give me a hard time about what I do Friday night. And honestly, it's usually not that interesting what I do on a Friday night. So it's kind of funny you bring that up.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting last night, though, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, we went out. You and I had dinner. We had a few. I had a couple of drinks, so that was fun. And we smoked a cigar too. That was a good time.
Yeah, yeah. So that was a first time in a while. Hey, let me just say this. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome. We're glad that you're here. We'd love for you to put some comments in the chat or say hello to us. And if you are a visitor that's back again, well, welcome back. And I give you a lot of credit for coming back. But, if you have something that you want to say, let us know. And please make sure that you're following us on social media. So follow me on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Make sure that you are getting some updates and things that we're doing. If you are on YouTube at all, go to the YouTube channel and you can subscribe to that and receive the updates for the new videos and that we put out. But I want to welcome everybody today. I hope that you're well. Carl, I'm glad you're here. Larry, good to see you this morning. Trevor, good to see you. Eddie, good to see you. Glad that everybody's here, up, raring to roar this morning. So good things. Hey, Carl, I got to say that you and I have been doing this thing on Friday night where we go out, blow off a little steam, have a little fun. And, last night was kind of a good night. We sat there, we smoked a cigar and kind of got to talk about a bunch of things and just kind of get caught up. So that was nice. And then, I have to tell you, I did a couple of things I normally don't do. And, we ate at like 10 o'clock last night and I usually don't do that. And then, me, I'm usually up in the morning at 4. And last night, well, I didn't go to bed till after 12. So it's kind of interesting. So a little bit of difference this morning. So, Hey, if I'm sluggish, I apologize. It's Carl's fault.
No, yeah, it's all my fault. That's good. But, we had a nice chat. And, I was telling you where we were at the day before we had a poker tournament. We had about 30 or 35 individuals that are all in real estate. And it was really great networking. So, a couple of things just come to mind. It's funny because I was sitting there, one of the people that I do real estate with, and I normally know him in his suit and jacket in his office, and he came up to me and we were playing poker. So we were all in a very very relaxed environment, and he said, "Hey, how you doing?" I didn't even recognize him, and I guess the point I'm making is, sometimes breaking up your routine is not always a bad thing, and of course, the last year has been a little crazy with networking and so on and so forth. And I know you're a huge networker, Mike. But it was just good to get out and meet some new people. I saw some people that I hadn't seen before. and just talk about what's going on in the multifamily space and really get their perspective. And there were some construction people there. There were some lending people there. There were some, some property management people there. And then last night, you and I just, we literally just took, like about an hour and a half, just sat and chatted about what's going on in your life, what's going on in my life, what's going on in your business. So, it's important to do that, especially now when we're so disconnected. Obviously we all want to be safe, with regard to our networking, but, I think we're getting back into that mode. I think people are going to start opening up again. People are going to start getting together again, and the groups might be smaller. They might not be those huge groups that you and I used to go to, Mike, but, I just want everybody listening to start thinking about that, because networking in real estate is really important. And I know you're huge on that.
Yeah. So let me just say a couple of things here. First, I need to reset the room. Hey, if you are joining us on Clubhouse this morning, this is Multifamily Unplugged. Glad that you are here. This is just kind of a unique room on Saturday morning because we're live on Facebook and we are live on Zoom. If you have a question or need something, please try and get a chat to us in Clubhouse. And if you have questions, you can maybe try and DM me. But I apologize if you're on Clubhouse and only are hearing some audio. So, Carl, you're right about networking. And I am really thinking that it's going to come back after what I saw last night and how full the restaurant was that we were at. And, they said they were only at 75% capacity, right? Which was still kind of relaxed, but yet still full. But here's what was really interesting. And I hate these masks, right? And we're sitting at the bar last night and all these people do not have their mask on. So I asked a couple people about it and they were like, oh yeah, hate them, not going to wear them. And, so I really think that we're going to start to see maybe our world come back around and things start to open more. But networking, I have done so much networking the last year on Zoom and LinkedIn. I've connected with people on LinkedIn, and Clubhouse these days is just off the chains for connecting with people. I've met some incredible people. I've actually talked to people in Africa and the Congo that are doing real estate there. To find out what real estate is like in other parts of the world really brings into perspective what we have here and the things that we can do here. So, I am just convinced that the world's going to come back and a lot of things are going to change and kind of we're going to re-engineer this whole thing, I believe. Here's my concerns. And I guess I sometimes don't really want to express my full opinion on some things. Just because, I always grew up learning that you don't talk about religion and you don't talk about politics, right? In a conversation. But I think there's some things that we need to talk about, and that is rents and the rent moratorium. When that gets released, what's going to happen? Who's going to get affected? Because I don't think anybody can sit back and say, hey, I'm not going to get affected. When you have somebody who's owned a property for a couple of years and all of a sudden they got a mortgage on it and now they can't pay their mortgage or cut the grass or pay the water bill, what are you going to do? Right? So I think we need to be looking at that and what's coming down the road. I have talked to a number of individuals over the last couple of weeks who are saying, hey, I'm stocking dry powder and I'm sitting on it, because I think in the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to see this thing totally turn over. But just think, when they release this eviction moratorium, what's going to happen? They keep pumping money into the economy. And then you're going to have all these forbearances, and owners who have taken a little reprieve on paying some of their mortgage payments start to come due. I don't know. Are we headed for a perfect storm? I don't know. Go ahead.
No. It's interesting, and none of us have a crystal ball, right? And we don't, you can never predict exactly. So I think one of the things in real estate, and Mike, I know you've been around long enough, something that an old real estate investor told me a long time ago. He said, real estate goes in cycles, right? And there's a lot of things that impact that cycle. Some things that we can foresee, some things we can't foresee, some things we can predict. And he said volatility affects that cycle as well. And I think you're exactly right. I think there's some volatility coming because, as you said, the renters have been affected by this, right? the landlords have been affected by this, right? Sellers have been affected by this. Buyers have been affected by this, right? Really, the only people that aren't affected by this, which is interesting, are the bankers. The bankers are usually the ones that are in the most control. And a lot of reason for that is they've got the Fed behind them. You know what I mean? They just can, borrow more money. So the bankers, they don't really care. They're kind of immune to all this stuff. But the other individuals or entities I just mentioned are going to be affected. The renters, the owners, the sellers, and the buyers. And figuring out where you are, because we're all in different places with regard to multifamily or with regard to real estate, but understanding where you are with that, what's coming around the corner, that I think there's going to be volatility when, for a lot of different variables, is important, because that's the thing that each and every one of us can take a look at. We can't predict the next black swan, because there's no doubt COVID was a black swan. Nobody would have seen that one coming. However, understanding where we are in the cycle and how it impacts you, I think, is very important, because absolutely. I mean, and Danny Barrero, our good friend Danny, who owns property, he talked about it in New York City, about the people not paying rent, and how he worked out deals with people, and how he's preparing, for the worst and hoping for the best, right? Isn't that the old saying?
Yeah.
And then reaching out to your network, talking to people, if you're in if you're in multifamily, or if you're in real estate, understanding that there's other people out there that can give you advice, that you can ask, hey, what do you see? What do you see coming? Or what do you, how are you preparing, for, if you took a forbearance, and when the bank comes knocking and saying, oh, we gave you forbearance for 9 months, but here comes the balloon.
Right.
Now here's the balloon payment, and how are you going to pay that? And looking at all your options. So I think that's really important.
Well, here's a misconception too about the forbearance thing, right? Is that a lot of times, if you don't have it set up right, you think automatically, hey, when I do a forbearance, those missed payments are going to go on the back of the loan, right? Which they're supposed to. If you make sure that those terms are done right, that's how it should work. But I have heard that there are some forbearances that have been happening right now, that they are saying that when your 6 months is up, you got a balloon payment that's due. Now, I'm sure you're going to be able to go back and mitigate some of that, but I think there's going to be some people that are going to get caught by surprise and see some things happen. And here's what I want to say, if there's any listeners out there this morning, whether you're on Facebook or Zoom, that Clubhouse, if you have a comment on this and you want to chime in, please chime in. I'd like to hear what some other people have to say about, where we possibly could be going.
Yeah, and Mike, you bring up a good point. I mean, your forbearance terms are set when you execute the loan.
Right.
So, that's very important, because and it brings up another point. A lot of people don't understand mortgages, and a lot of people just sign whatever paperwork is put in front of them without really understanding the ramifications. And your forbearance terms are set when you execute the loan. So there's basically two types. The type that if you get a forbearance, it is tacked onto the back of the loan, and the loan term is extended. Or the other type is when the forbearance period is up, there's a balloon payment, and that's the one that I think is going to catch people by surprise, because you might have a 10,000. I mean, depending on the loan and the size of the property and your monthly payments and all that kind of stuff, you could have tens of thousands of dollars owed at the end of that forbearance period, which is probably going to be coming up in the summer. Right. So you want to be aware of that, because otherwise you're going to very quickly find yourself in hot water with the bank.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Hey, one thing I wanted to talk about this morning too was leadership. I think that this is a time that we're going to be coming out of this season in life, this season in business, where leaders are going to emerge, right? And a lot of times I think there's a misconception, Carl, about leadership, that leadership happens from the top, right? And that people lead. And that's not necessarily always, I don't believe that's always necessarily true. How I like to look at leadership is, if I can empower the people in my organization or in my network to lead from the back, right? because if you can push, then it's easier to pull for the leader, right? So the guy who is running the company or the guy who is running an organization can pull easier because the people in the back are pushing. So I think it really comes to, how do you, as a company owner, operator, entrepreneur, how do you run your organization? How are you treating people? How are you working with empowering people to lead from within your organization?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you, Mike. And I think when you come through, or when you're coming up to a challenging time, leadership is important. And I didn't know we were going to talk about this, but that's great. I love that topic because I'm a big Napoleon Hill guy, and he talks
Right.
about that, the tenets of leadership, in the book Think and Grow Rich, in the chapter on organized planning, which is, and remember, Napoleon Hill wrote that book after interviewing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of powerful leaders, men and women, back at the turn of the century, and he came up with 11 tenets, 11 things that leaders do. And you touched on a couple of them, right? And I think it is important to understand that, first of all, human beings are natural leaders, right? Leaders aren't born, we're all natural leaders. Some leaders develop differently than other leaders, and it really comes down to your mindset. And are you the type of leader that's going to be forceful, or are you going to be the type of leader that empowers people, right? And that's, you can only force people to do something for so long.
Right.
You can empower them indefinitely, right? And so, and then the other thing that he talks about, the difference between a manager and a leader, right? And a manager is the one, they're the ones that set the course. They say, we're going to go in this direction. The manager is responsible for executing. You know what I mean? So yeah, and right now I agree with you. I think leadership in your own business, even in your own home, is important, and really starts with you. It starts with the individual.
Yeah.
So
So let me ask you a question. I'm just going to, and I know that you and I didn't talk about any of this. And this is what I like about Saturday morning, right? Is that it's just whatever comes up, we talk about it. And so, Carl, other than Think and Grow Rich, what's the best book you've ever read, and specifically around leadership?
wow, around leadership. I like Stephen Covey's Seven Habits. That's a really good one, because it talks about what successful people do, the habits of successful people. That's a good one. And then I read a lot of old books, so the Working with the Laws is another great book, because it talks about the natural laws of the universe and how they impact human beings, and it talks about leadership in that book.
Right.
Another great one is The Power of Now. I think that was Eckhart Tolle, I think, wrote that one. And it talks about being present. It talks about, what's happening right now, and how do you stay in control of your emotions, and how do you, think clearly when all hell is breaking loose, right? And so those are just a couple, the ones that come to mind. And of course, Think and Grow Rich is the big one. And then, we talked about this last night, Mike. I mean, the greatest book ever written. I was in your house, and you had a few passages from the Bible. I mean, that's an incredible. It's called the greatest book ever written for a reason. So there's a lot of really great leadership stuff in the Bible.
So, hey, it brings up a couple of questions, and people are going to think now that we scripted this, but there's two things you mentioned that I just am passionate about. And I'm a huge Stephen Covey fan, right? His book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, chapter 2 in that book is begin with the end in mind. And, that's that concept that I've had for years. That's how I wound up writing my book, really was one of the key reasons where that whole exit plan title came from. Because, I think too many times we look at something and we just, it's ready, fire instead of ready, aim, fire. We need to think things through more, be clearer on things, right? When I look back at my own history, and stubbing my toe along the way, that process of not paying attention and not looking down the road at what's going to happen really gets you jammed up. And so, you have to pay more attention, but you really got to focus in on the end, because I think that end is what designs the path, right? So, I always talk about, hey, listen, Carl, we're going to take a trip. We're going to drive from Chicago to LA. Let's get the map out. Let's map it so that we know exactly what road to go. You know what? Siri might be right along the way. And don't you dare talk about Siri this morning. But Siri might be right along the way. And but we got to plan it, right? Where are we going to stay? How long are we going to stay? So that whole trip needs to be planned. So it's the same thing with thinking of the end in mind. And for anybody who might not know, what I'm really specifically talking about is the book I wrote called Exit Plan. I didn't mean to do a commercial here, but this is your complete guide to multifamily investing and why you need an exit plan before you buy. So often we do stuff. It was like the first deal I ever did. I bought that property thinking, I listened to everything the seller said, and it was all wrong. So then I was caught with this thing. But then one other quick point about this, and then please, you can chime in, change the subject. But you talk about the Bible, right, and being the greatest book ever written. I did a half day event a couple of weeks ago, and I talked about leadership as I got going in the morning, and I talked about leadership, and I told a story of David from the Bible. David, as much pain and suffering and loss that he went through, he was a great leader. He led because of all the garbage that happened in his life. So, I think some of the greatest leaders lead because they don't listen to the noise, and they walk beyond the devastating things that happen in their life. So I say this because I know that there's people out there that have situations in their life where maybe there's been loss, maybe there's been health issues, maybe there's job loss. Hey, maybe you went to prison. And maybe, something happened that caused you to have to reset your life, right? And if that's the case, you can still become a great leader. You can become an example. And Carl, like you said, it starts at home, right?
Yeah. Napoleon Bonaparte comes to mind. A lot of people, use him as an example because he was short, but, he had really an incredible life. He's some people say he was the greatest military leader since we started looking at military leaders. And his life is very interesting. He came from a meager beginnings. I believe he grew up in Italy, I believe, and then he went to France, and he went to a very privileged school. So he was an outcast because all the other kids came from privilege, and he did not. And of course, he was short. But one of the things they said, that he was really focused. He was very focused. He was really good at math. And he was determined. And one of his most famous quotes was, I only see the objective. The obstacle must give way," right? So that was his approach. He only saw the objective, which is what you're talking about, the end goal, right? It was the end in mind with Napoleon Bonaparte. All the obstacles that appeared, he said, must give way. And that's the way he lived his life. He only looked at the objective. He only looked at the end result, or the exit. If we're talking about multifamily real estate, he focused on the exit. Everything else that happened, just he didn't pay. It's not that he didn't pay attention to it, but he didn't let it stop him. And that's why we remember that guy's name, because he was unstoppable.
Right. So here's a key point in this, right? If you're in the value add business, and you're in that space where you're buying property, whether it's single family and doing a flip, whether it's small multifamily or big multifamily, and you're trying to re-engineer deals, or you're trying to restructure deals, you know what? There's a leadership component that goes along with it. Because here's what happens. We can have the greatest plan. We can have the greatest business plan. But if you don't have a leader who's executing on that business plan and getting things done, you kind of stalemate. You stop right at the wall where you begin. You might get out a couple of feet from the starting blocks, but all of a sudden it's like, which way do I go now? That's why I talk about that exit planning piece, because don't show up at closing thinking that you're going to get in the car after closing and go, okay, now what do I do? right? Make sure that you've got the plan already in motion. I know I've bought deals that 3 days before a closing, I've got contractors and people out on job sites that, okay, I hope we're closing come Monday, but here's the stuff that needs to get done before then, right? So it all becomes execution. And, that's a big chunk of leadership too.
Yeah, and I tell you, Mike, I'm an example of that. I mean, the first building I bought was an 18-unit building. I had no clue what I was doing. And, you go out of the closing and you got a bag of keys, you know what I mean? And maybe the former owner sent letters to the tenants, maybe he didn't. So you show up on the door, they have no idea who you are,
Right.
and you're saying, hey, you owe rent from 3 months, and they slam the door in your face. I mean, it's just, and part of what, part of that there's some of that stuff you can predict and some of that stuff you can't. And the more that you can be ahead of the curve, the better off you're going to be. You know what I mean? And of course, the next time I bought a building, I made sure that I gave direction to the owner a week before the closing to send out notices and, to let the tenants know who I was and, blah, 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 blah. However, that, I didn't have to go through that the first exercise, of learning by fire and by failure. However, that's how I learned a lot of things. I know you did too. And, finding a mentor is it's something that is so key. And, you and I are both in that coaching space. And again, I think part of the reason why you and I have had success in the coaching space is because we've been on the other side of the equation, right? I mean, I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on coaching, hundreds of thousands of dollars, mostly with, Bob Proctor and his organization, Think and Grow Rich. And it's invaluable. I mean, it's literally invaluable. It's probably some of the best money I invested. And some people say, well, that's not really investing in real estate. However, if you're using that training and you're using that mindset stuff, which was primarily what I was, and you apply it to real estate, it's absolutely the equivalent of investing in real estate. And my point is, whether you work with anybody that's listening, whether you work with Mike or you work with me on mindset or whatever, find a mentor, find somebody that's doing what you've done and connect with them. And you're going to get more bang if you put in some bucks. You know what I mean? So, spend the money to save time as opposed to taking forever, trying to save money, because the money you're going to invest on the front end in coaching is going to save you so much time. Plus, you're going to save money just on your first deal if you get the right coach, because they're going to give you direction that's going to literally save you money. Yeah. And it's the old adage, right? What would you rather save, time or money? I'd rather save time, because time, you can replace money, but time is our most valuable asset. Right. And so, hooking up with somebody that has done what you want to do is so valuable, because that's going to save you time. And if I could have known what I know now back then, it would have been a different story, right? I mean, and unfortunately, I can't go back to when I started investing. You can't rewind the time, you can't.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. So, hey, let me just reset the room real quick. Hey, if you're just joining us, good morning. This is Multifamily Unplugged, raw, unscripted radio. You never know what you're going to get your head wrapped around here on Saturday morning. So grab your coffee, sit back, and enjoy this ride. I'm joined this morning by my co-host, Moose, and we are live on Clubhouse, live on Facebook, and live on Zoom. So, boy, pick your passion and sit in and grab hold of this. If you have comments or need anything, please put them in the chat, and we will try and get those questions answered for you. If you're on Clubhouse, try and just DM me, and we'll see if we can get your questions answered. Have a great day. And Carl, what else are we going to talk about? Oh, here.
Well, I want to talk. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to talk about something. So it's kind of funny. I've been underwriting a bunch of deals lately, right? Because my focus here is that I'm gonna get my arms wrapped around a deal, and there's some deals that have come across my desk that at first glance you might go, man, this really looks good. This really looks like there's some opportunity here. There might be some meat on the bone, right? And I start to underwrite these things, and first of all, when we underwrite a deal, that there's that piece in the beginning, right, that you need to know and understand, based on what your buying criteria is that you have built, what the population growth is, what the job growth is, what the next 5, 10, 20 years of the city business plan, economic development plan is going to be. What's the crime rate? What are the schools rating at? What's the household income? Hey, listen, a lot of people look at these things and say, oh, I can push rent. Well, as I learned in my first deal, that you can't necessarily push rent unless the household income in the area matches it. If rents are at $800 and I want to move them to 1,000, if my average tenant's not making 36,000 a year, I can't do it. If they're only making $28,000 a year, it's not going to make sense, right? So you have to look at those things early on. But here's the place that I'm at. So the markets I'm looking in right now, pretty much those things check out. I understand, and I can at first glance pretty quickly just determine. But here's what happens, right? I start to take the data and I put the data into my spreadsheet. And as I put the data in my spreadsheet, I start to look at these returns and I go, man, so here the objective is cash on cash return and long-term wealth, right? Well, if I don't have both of those together, it doesn't make sense, right? I need to see maybe a 7% cash on cash. And I think on the worst side, a 16% all in return over term, right? So I start to put these numbers in at par value, meaning what they come in off of an OM, the offering memorandum, or off an MLS sheet. And first of all, coming right off the MLS, you don't have enough data, right? They don't give you enough data. And you, on an OM, sometimes the data is not right. I underwrote a deal in Cincinnati the other day. And when we underwrote it, there was a visible error in the math in the OM, $10,000 to the favor of the cap rate. And I put it in trying to figure out why this deal didn't work. But if I made the adjustment, man, the deal really didn't work. And then I found out that that they didn't check the taxes. So of course I'm going to go, when I'm underwriting, I'm going to go to the county assessor and I'm going to pull the tax bill and I'm going to look at what the valuation is and what the taxes are. And when I did that, I was like, my God, the taxes are $7,000 more than on the tax bill than what the broker put in. So listen here, the point is, make sure you double check and triple check your data, put it in right, make sure that you're evaluating things properly, make sure that your spreadsheet and underwriting stuff balances with the OM, and then start to do a stress test on it. But I'm surprised at the returns, and people are buying this stuff. So, that goes back to the original concern about where this market's going to go and what's going to happen.
Yeah, and you bring up a lot of great points, Mike. I used to be a banker, right? And so I got trained as a banker, as a mortgage banker, and the bankers are the most conservative people, right? As they should be, right? And so when they're analyzing a deal, they have no emotion. It's all about the numbers, right? And they have their checklists and their spreadsheets, and they go through and they do exactly that. They take nothing for granted. When you walk into a loan, with all your paperwork and they check every single number, and they do exactly what you said, which is what you should do. Don't take anybody's word for granted, because they can either make a mistake intentionally or unintentionally, and that can just literally spin the deal out of the profit zone. So that's very important. And then also understanding some of the things that you just talked about: your cash on cash return, your net present value of money, the internal rate of return. We're not going to go into it right now, but those are all things that you want to understand, because those are important when you're looking at an investment. And I think what we're going to see, Mike, is we're going to see a lot of people that, and we've seen it before in other cycles, where you get the uneducated buyer, right? That for whatever reason, they're sitting on some capital and they want to get into the market because maybe they're, the last year has been, they're antsy, so they just want to jump on anything. And then you got the sellers that love situations like that because they're just, no matter what they put on paper and in the offering memorandum or whatever, they're going to have 5 or 6 people bidding on it. So they're, then it becomes a seller's market, right? And what happens, unfortunately, for the professional investor is it drives up the prices, right? And it affects the cap rate. And then you and I sit there and we scratch our heads and go, who's buying these properties? Because they don't pencil out, you know what I mean? And it's because they don't pencil out for the conservative investor or the banker type mentality, which is really the professional investor, and so that I think we're going to see some of that.
Well, it's funny is I was actually, and I love multifamily, right? I think it's probably the most sexy asset class out there. I think it's the best place to spend your time. And if you can afford to do an A-class deal right now, because of the compression in cap rates, you probably should do it because you're having that same compression in B's and C deals, which is driving those prices up anyhow. And you might, if you can afford to go step up and do a class A, you're probably better off in that bucket right now anyhow. But that's a whole nother conversation. We could talk an hour just on that philosophy or thought process. But here's the thing. I was listening into a conversation the other day, and what these guys were saying was that because of the cap rate compression right now in multifamily, that some smart investors are looking in other asset classes. So they're looking in warehouse and they're looking in light manufacturing spots, right? In other asset classes. They're still not looking at retail. But boy, there's a lot of talk going on about retrofits for some of these apartment or hotels, right? Because the hotel industry got whacked here. And, what is the retrofit for some of those buildings? Is there a retrofit for them? And what does that look like moving forward?
Is that a technical term, Mike? They got whacked. Is that a technical term that you use?
Hey,
they got clobbered.
Being that we're coming from Chicago, it is a technical term here.
Yeah. No, they got clobbered. I mean, that's true. And a lot of there are some people that are looking at repositioning. The repositioning of some of these retail spaces. I know somebody that they're buying up spaces like banks. That are you're laughing. Oh yeah, we had a good conversation last night, didn't we? But no,
Boy.
they're buying banks and they're turning them into some medical, they turned a couple of them into medical testing centers, right? And so, thinking outside the box is great, and that's one of the things that we both like about real estate. There's so many different ways, entry points, and so many different tactics and everything else, and even within all the different asset class and strategies and everything else, mindset is so important, right? And we talk about that, and we talked about leadership earlier, and really, regardless of what you're going to do, find somebody that's doing it, right? And connect with them. And these days, it's so, there's podcasts and there's this clubhouse that you're talking about. There's so many different ways to connect with people. Where 30 years ago, Mike, when you and I were there, and you and I've talked about it, back then you got a set of tapes, and you listened to them, and if you lost one, you were lost because I remember one time I got a set of like 10 tapes. I couldn't find tape number 7. And I'm like, what? That was like what did I miss? You know what I mean? And so but these days.
Nightingale Conant never just replaced the one tape. You couldn't go get just the one tape, right? You had to buy the whole set again.
You had to buy the whole set, right? And there was no Amazon. You couldn't go to Amazon and say, I need, tape 1 of, this program or tape 7 of this program. And all kidding aside, the point is, take the time to educate yourself, and hopefully, the majority of people have taken this time that we've had this last year and have done something productive with it, right? And have read or joined, a Zoom group or maybe done a 3-day event like you've done, and so, don't be too in such a rush, to jump in because, you want to the patience is a virtue, right? And you want to really, you don't want to get emotional. And I know, Mike, that's one thing, when we were bankers, we never got emotional because we didn't care. We knew that there was another deal. And I know that you're really good about checking your emotion when you're doing your analysis, because you don't want to make a decision and get all geared up about something and then regret it later.
Right. Hey, listen, we need to start winding down. I'm looking at the time here, right? It's 10:42, and I have 2 podcasts I need to record this afternoon. But one thing I want to say is we didn't talk about what we were going to talk about today.
Yeah.
Remember last night we said,
Yeah.
hey, let's roll out that who we were going to talk about, who we wanted to try and get on the show, because we wanted to try and go get some people to come on our show that were bigger in the multifamily space, bigger in the entrepreneur leadership arena. So what I just want to say is we'll come back, we'll revisit that. And, we have guests for like the next 5 or 6 weeks again here. But I want to talk about, and I want our listeners to say, hey, try and get, John Maxwell or Gary Vee or somebody, who our listeners want us to try and get on the show. We'll try and go get them on the show. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing. So why don't we just say that anybody that's listening, if you have somebody you think would be a great guest for our show, or somebody that you want to hear in this forum, reach out to Mike, reach out to me, and make some suggestions, because I think you're right. I think for the next 5 weeks or so, we've got guests, but after that, we're building out our schedule. So if there's anybody that anybody wants us to reach out to, or you can connect us with, that maybe have has a good presence, and that you think would add quite a bit to this conversation in this forum, definitely, let us know about that. And Mike, how should they get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Best way is through email, mike@mycoreintentions.com. And for anybody who doesn't know, if you want to go download my book, you can go grab a free e-copy of that at my website. Go to mycoreintentions.com/exit plan, and you can get a free ebook. And I just, because we were talking about exit plan, I thought it'd be a good idea just to throw that plug in there today. So, Carl, as always, Saturday morning is a pleasure with you, and I look forward to next week. And who knows what'll happen between now and then, but we'll keep rolling. But hey, if you joined us this morning on Clubhouse, welcome. Glad you were here. If you joined us on Facebook Live, glad you were here, and Zoom as well. Remember, we are very accessible, always approachable. Send us an email, direct message us or text us, whatever. And if we can get any questions answered or try and help you in any way, we certainly will. Carl, it's a pleasure.
All right. Have a great day, Mike. Adios, everybody.